Greetings, everyone. My name is Chelsea Hedderig. I am a biologist with Smithers. I'm here today to give a short overview of a poster that we will be presenting for the 2020 CTAC North America Virtual Conference with FMC. So the poster is titled Toxicity Test Method Development Using a Non-Standard Aquatic Macrophyte Species, Vallisneria americana. So currently the only aquatic plant test guideline available is OECD Test Guideline 239, which is for Myriophyllum spiccatum. This test guideline has acceptance criteria that is based off of control performance, and the guideline was developed by ring tests and uses environmental conditions well suited for Myriophyllum. An alternative to testing only Myriophyllum is to conduct what is called the species sensitivity distribution. These use a suite of species, each having their own risk assessment to a compound being assessed in an effort to gather a clearer picture of sensitivity within a community. OECD Guideline 239 allows for modifications of the original guideline to support alternative species testing, but does not provide suggestions for what those environmental parameters should be. So here we take a look at different environmental conditions for American eelgrass, Vallisneria americana. The goal was to explore environmental parameters and obtain a control performance data set that can confidently match the current acceptability criteria laid out in OECD Guideline 239 for the clearest comparison. So for the acceptability criteria, there are four criteria it must meet. For all controls, the first one is that they must have at least a twofold mean total increase in length from day 0 by test termination. The second is that they have to have at least a twofold increase in wet weight values from day 0 at test termination. The third is percent coefficient of variation for shoot fresh weight yields must be at or below 35%. And the fourth is that all control plants must remain healthy at test termination. Now, we chose Vallisneria americana based on its relative abundance, availability, culturability, and the important role it plays across ecosystems all around the globe. So here we did a series of trials that utilize the environmental conditions and laboratory parameters suggested by Myriophyllum OECD 239 with one or two variables under observation at a time. Now, the parameters we looked into included whether the plants were floating or rooted, the test temperature, test duration, and the absence or presence of aeration during the study. Our first trials compared rooted versus floating plants at different temperatures and different study durations. The temperatures were 20 degrees Celsius, which is standard Myriophyllum temperature, and we also looked into 26 degrees Celsius. And the two study durations were 14 days, which is pretty standard, and then 21 days was the other test duration. We found that all floating plants, regardless of test duration or test temperature, were not able to meet either total length or wet weight increase from day 0 values. Meanwhile, the rooted Vallisneria achieved twofold increases in length and wet weight from day 0 in the 26 degrees Celsius group at both 14 and 21 days. So with this information, we looked further into the rooted eelgrass with and without aeration at both 26 degrees Celsius and 28 degrees Celsius. Both of these used the standard 14-day test duration. Of all these groups, they all passed the twofold increases needed. Aeration showed to have a greater increase than no aeration, and the 28 degrees Celsius group outperformed the 26 degrees Celsius. Our last investigation was with all of these trials that passed the first two control acceptability criteria. We had to see who remained at or below that 35% cutoff for CVs for shoot wet weight at termination. We found that the 26 degrees Celsius with aeration was the only group that was actually above that 35% CV mark. So of these groups, we saw that groups with aeration have a higher percent CV than groups without. We found that the 28 degrees Celsius with no aeration for 14 days was our top performer, with total length increases from day 0 being 2.9-fold, wet weight increases of 3.2-fold, and a 28% CV of control shoot wet weight. We chose to perform this study again with a different population of eelgrass that we had to confirm its repeatability, which it did pass with comparable results. And the experimental design also allowed for the least amount of variation from the standard Myriophyllum test guideline while comfortably meeting the same acceptability criteria laid out by the original OECD 239. So now, the results of these trials enable the use of American eelgrass to have a strong alternative species for comparison when using these species sensitivity distributions with these minor temperature change. And it also provides guidance and test design for non-standard species that have a similar growth habit or habitat type as Vallisneria americana. Now, if there are any questions, feel free to reach out. You can contact at info.ers@smithers.com, and thank you all for your time.